Hey guys, I just have a quick intro to this video here. Basically, after I was done recording it, I went to go edit it in Sony Vegas, and I realized that 30 minutes of what I had recorded was simply just not being recognized by Sony Vegas. So, long story short, I had to put it into Pinnacle Studios, edit it in there, and then bring it back on the Sony Vegas. But unfortunately, through that process, some of the audio got out of sync with the video, and that's a problem for the first 18 minutes of this video. So I would suggest just letting this run in the background, in your browser, and do stuff on the internet and just listen to it. Because if you watch the first 18 minutes, I'm kind of out of sync with what I'm saying, and it's a little bit annoying. But after the 18-minute mark, after I'm done talking about Final Fantasy 13, it goes back to normal. So hope you guys enjoy this extended edition of games I bought recently. Alright, hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Games I Bought Recently. I wanted to start off with Heavy Rain, which I picked up when it came out. It only took me a couple of days to beat it, but it was an amazing game that I just really want to talk about. Now, it's basically an adventure-style game, very similar to Indigo Prophecy, if any of you ever played that, because it's by the same developers. And it's heavily driven by quick-time button-press events, so anybody that's ever played, God of War, and you can remember where, you gotta hit the buttons in time, and everything happens on screen, and you're just hitting the buttons. It's just like that, only it's much improved. There's a lot of, motion control to it, and different sequences. It's not very simple. It works really well. So the gist of the story, without giving any spoilers, is basically you play as a father, and his son gets kidnapped by the origami killer, and he has to try and get him back. And you also play as an FBI agent, you play as a cop, and you play as a girl that kind of, by chance, got thrown into the story, and she basically gets involved really deep into it. Now, there's two different types of gameplay modes in here. There's parts where you're directly controlling your character and moving him around the game world, and then there's the quick button events. Very similar to, God of War, where you have to press buttons on time, and, the events unfold on screen. You're not directly controlling the character, but you're putting in the inputs with the 6-axis controller, you're putting in the inputs with the button presses. But I have to say, since the whole game basically revolves around that for its core gameplay mechanics, it works very well. Just for example, you're in a fight scene, and you have to take the 6-axis, and they tell you to do different motions, you have to move it to the left to dodge, and then you have to push it up to hit the guy, and then you have to do, like, these crazy button presses to do, punches and tackle the guy to the ground, and you have to shake them, and they're done very well, and they're just kind of thrown throughout the game. It could be as simple as putting a key in a car and turning it, having to turn your 6-axis controller for the basic motion, or a sequence that really stood out to me where you're driving into head-on traffic, and you have to, use the 6-axis to dodge the cars and everything like that. The coolest part about Heavy Rain that really stood out to me and made me really truly enjoy this game and made it stand out from basically any games that have come out in recent memory on the consoles is that the way that the story unfolds is kind of like one of those choose-your-own-adventure books. So your main characters can actually get killed off through the course of the story. So you could be halfway through the game and one of your characters can die. They won't be there for the rest of the story. Or a simple thing is saving a sub-character in the game. They can either die or they can survive, and that'll change the rest of how the story plays out. And the thing is, as other people have said, it's best to play Heavy Rain without ever reloading a checkpoint. Just let the game flow, play through it. Don't retry any sequences. If one of your characters dies, just let it go. Play to the end, because the story flows seamlessly and it works really, really well. So my first playthrough, all my characters survived, and at the very end of the game, most of them got killed. One of them got arrested. And it was an ending that I didn't want. And just for kicks, I reloaded the last chapter because I had already beat the game. And I redid it just to see, how dramatically you can impact the story if you did things differently. So I replayed the very last chapter, and I got a totally different ending. And basically the whole game is like that. So, some events, it's the characters can't die even though it seems like they can. But there are many times in the game where, a character can die, or you can have an event that drastically changes the rest of the way that the story plays out. And it's very interesting. So it's like reading one of those choose-your-own-adventure books, but only in video game form. And since the story is told very well, the voice actors, for the most part, do a really good job. It's very believable. The graphics in the game are outstanding. It looks as realistic of in-game characters that I've seen, I think, in a long time. Possibly the best-looking game in terms of, character models looking like realistic people. The mouth movements all match up really well. And some of you might be questioning if you'll like the game or not. It really is one of those games where you'll either love it or you might hate it. I'd definitely say it's worth a rent. You know, if you're on the fence, if you think you're even going to hate this game, I still recommend renting it because I don't think you've played anything like this before. And for those of you that may think it's boring, or it might be boring, it is true that, you know, maybe the first hour, hour and a half of the game can be a little bit slow. You know, you're playing as a father, you're out in your backyard playing with your kids, you're cooking a meal, you're getting the table ready for your family. It can seem a bit slow, but trust me, once you get into this game, it's like non-stop action sequence after action sequence. And there were a couple of times where, you know, my hands were sweaty because I knew that what I did in this crazy event in the game, and I won't give any spoilers, but there's some crazy events in this game where, you know, my character can die or I can, you know, really truly impact what happens. And it had me on the edge of my seat a lot of times. For those of you that have played the game, no spoilers aside here, but you know what sequence I'm talking about. Where you're down in the basement with that old guy as the girl. Yeah, one of the most like intense sequences I've played in a game in a long time. But Heavy Rain, guys, I highly recommend this game. Without a doubt, worth a rental. In terms of buying it, it does have replay value because you can play through it a second time and have it unfold differently, which I'm not going to do right away. I plan on doing that in the future. I'll probably give it, you know, a year, 2 years, maybe a couple of years before I go back to it and play it again, because then that way, you know, it'll be fresh to me because I won't have the story fresh in my mind and I'll make different choices than I did last time. So, Heavy Rain, definitely worth a look exclusively on the PlayStation 3. I'm very happy with this one. Alright, the next game I want to talk about is Final Fantasy 13. And I bought the PlayStation 3 version, and I'll tell you why. I originally did plan to buy the 360 version, but I changed my mind at the very last minute, like the day before the game came out. And the reason being is because the Xbox 360 version, the FMV sequences in the game, and there's a lot of them, are compressed, so they actually appear, from what I've read, more pixelated than the uncompressed version in the PlayStation 3. Also, the audio is compressed in the 360 version, it's not compressed in the PS3 version. The textures are a little bit better on the PS3 as opposed to the 360, and the 360 version also has 3 discs, and the PlayStation 3 version has 1, so I figured, you know what, I'm just going to go with the PS3 version. There really was no reason for me to go with the 360 one when the PS3 one is obviously, it is superior to the 360 version. There's no way to argue it, so I'm happy I went with this version. And to go along with it, I also did pick up the Collector's Edition guide, which is really nice. It has thick pages. It's really, the guide is totally not needed. For the 40 hours that I've played the game so far, I really have not ever had to check the walkthrough in here, except for maybe like 1 or 2 boss battles, because the game is linear, but I'll get into that in a second. It is a very nice strategy guide, though. But in terms of the game, I just want to start off by saying that I really am loving this game right now. I was on the fence about it. I was getting kind of worried before the game came out. I was like, man, am I really going to like this? It seems very similar to Final Fantasy X, which wasn't one of my favorite Final Fantasies. I was getting a little bit scared by, you know, how linear it was supposed to be and how there's no towns. But I just want to tell you guys that, at least in my opinion, all that stuff really doesn't even matter. It's a fantastic game. I haven't played it in a couple of days because I've been busy with other games, but I definitely plan on getting back to this soon. But when the first day I had this, I played it for like 8 or 9 hours. It was very hard to put down because the story to me is very engrossing. Now, if any of you watched any video reviews and stuff from websites, a lot of them complained about the story being like overly dramatic and all this stuff, you know, typical Final Fantasy. But I'm not really sure what they're talking about because I'm really enjoying it so far. What's helped me is that there's an in-game menu system where you can go to read and like recap the story, which I highly suggest. It's updated frequently. So if a story event happens in the game and you know you're not really sure what just happened, I highly recommend that you go and you go to the in-game menus and read through the story recaps because there's a lot of twists and turns in here and it can get very confusing with all the different names of the Falsi, the Lacey, the CF, the Sanctumlessy, the Pulselessy. You know, there's a lot of different kinds of names in this game, so it can be hard to keep up with it unless you're reading through the menus and the story prompts in the game, which I'm doing, and it's really helped me to understand the story. But aside from the story, which is, you know, typical, you know, good guy versus bad guy, I can't go into spoilers because I'm going to point in the game now where things really took a twist in the story, and I'm really, you know, it took me by surprise where, you know, the first 30 hours of the game you think you're playing, you know, to take down the bad guys, but then something happens and I just have to say that it's one of the best RPG plot twists that I've seen in a while. It's very science fiction-y. I can't say what it is though, but it took me by surprise. But let me get down to the bullet points of this game and the main things that people are discussing. In terms of linearity, yes, the game is extremely linear. There's 13 chapters in the game. The first 10 chapters took me about, I think it was like 30 hours. I'm not 100%. I really forget. But the first 10 chapters, all the dungeons are literally straight lines with every now and then there'll be a deviating path, and on the end of that path there'll be like an item. But for the most part, every single dungeon is like a line that, you know, it might move around a couple of times, it might go into like a little open area, but they're all linear. Now, in a way, it doesn't really bother me, because for one, the combat is good. But the way that the dungeons are still laid out, it keeps you moving. There's story sequences, you know, throughout the dungeon, so it's not like you're just going straight through a line. They'll take breaks throughout the dungeon and, you know, introduce story sequences and let you know, get you to know the characters better. But I guess it's just the way that the game was designed to push you. It keeps pushing you through the story, and to me, it was paced very well. You know, when I was playing it for, you know, blocks of 5 to 6 hours at a time, it did start to get pretty repetitive, because the whole first 30 hours basically were, you know, cutscene, dungeon, battle, and then, you know, cutscene, another dungeon, another, you know, battling, cutscene. The whole first half of the game is like that. I'm up to the point in the game now where it opens up in chapter 11, and it's a bit more open world, where you can kind of go on these side missions where you take down marks, which are basically enemies that you're targeted to go and kill, and then you get some items for it. I haven't really gotten to the very end game stuff yet, so in terms of side missions that people talk about, it basically boils down to, you know, running through this big open area, you know, getting to maybe a new section in that area, killing a big boss enemy, and then going and doing it again. That's what the side missions are at this point in the game. Now, I haven't beat the game yet, so I'm not sure what, you know, other side missions or endgame stuff happens afterwards, but that's basically what it is right now. And don't let it seem like I'm complaining and hating on the linearity. Honestly, it barely... I didn't really even notice it, because the characters in the story were so engrossing, and it just kept on moving at a very swift pace. You didn't stay in a dungeon for too long. You know, every area is different. You know, it kept me on my toes. But that's another good point. If you guys don't get into the story on this game, you're most likely gonna hate it, because, you know, sure, the battle system is really good, but the story is just so prevalent in this game. You know, there's so many cutscenes and everything, and it relies so much on its story that if you just don't get into it, or you don't like the characters, you're probably not going to be able to finish the game, because honestly you would just be playing for the, you know, the battles then. And in terms of the battles, those are also really fun, really interesting. They're very fast paced. Basically, for the first couple of hours of the game, it's very bare bones, so I won't even talk about it. Once you reach a certain point in the game, pretty early on, you open up the Power Grim system. I guess that's how you say it. But basically, you can switch between all different sets of party roles. So, you know, you might have a party setup where you have a tank, you have a healer, you have, you know, a commando, a damage dealer, basically. And then you might have a setup where there's one tank, 2 healers, you might have a setup where there's 2 mages, and 1 melee attacker, and you can switch between these setups on the fly, and you can customize them however you want. And I have to say, it's a ton of fun to be able to customize your party. Which, actually, you can't customize your party. That's another part of the game. You can't actually customize your party team, like in terms of what members you have in your party, until much later in the game. I got there, I think, around 25-30 hours. So throughout the first, like, 20-30 hours of the game, the characters in your party are set up by the story, like where you're at in the story. So at times you might only have 2 people in your party, or when you have 3, you can't, you know, choose who you have. But in terms of the battles, they're very fast-paced. Let me just give you an example, like a good boss fight. You start off the battle, and you have like a buffer, a debuffer, and a medic. So you have someone on your team that's buffing up your party with, you know, defense and shell and everything like that. And then you have another person that's, you know, hindering the enemy and decreasing their attack, decreasing their resistances. And then you have the medic to, you know, heal the damage while they're doing that. Once everybody's all buffed up and everything, you switch to, you know, 2 mages no, you switch to, say, a mage, an attacker, and a tank, so that way the tank can take the damage, the other 2 guys can attack the, the enemy. Now, the different roles that you have in your party are important because every enemy in the game has this bar which gets filled up as they take damage or as you debuff them or use status alignment spells on them. And once this bar reaches the maximum for whatever enemy you're facing, they basically go into a breaking point where the damage can be increased dramatically, like up to 1,000% or something like that at some points. So you're basically, the strategy is to get the enemy's bars to fill up. And to do this, you use a mage, a commander, and then once you break them, you switch into all-out, like attack mode. And once their bar decreases, they go back down to, their normal defense, and you got to do it all over again. So you're constantly switching between, the different paradigms, at least in the boss battles, which get very challenging later on. The first 20 hours of the game are pretty simple. I never really ever got a game over. Normal enemy battles, you usually switch between two main paradigms. Once again, that's in the first 30 hours. And I keep talking about, the first 30 hours versus, afterwards, because the game truly, it's like almost a different game once you get to that 30-hour mark. The first 30 hours are easy and it's very linear, and then once you get to that certain point in the game at Chapter 11, it gets a lot harder. You're switching between paradigms a lot more often. The game kind of opens up. So the first 30 hours, it really does feel almost like a different game. Now, once again, I'm 40 hours in, so I have not seen, the last, I'd say, I guess, 40% of the game. And before I get too off topic, one other part of the battles that worried a lot of people is that you actually only control one character during the fighting, which is basically your party leader. So the other two AI characters are all controlled, not by you, but by the AI. And I have to say, it works really well. If you had to control the two other characters, it would seriously be way too much micromanaging. The battles are way too fast-paced to be able to, have to handle 3 separate characters. But switching between the paradigms, the AI on the characters is very good. Like if you switch to one of the AIs, put them as a medic, they'll heal you right away. There's a priority list. Well, they'll heal the party leader first, and then the tank, and then blah blah blah. And the buffers will obviously give the attack buff first to the attacker, and then they'll give a faith or a MP buff to the magic users. So the AI is actually really good in this game. But it's strange in a way because it still feels like you are directly controlling them because you're controlling their role constantly throughout the battle. But in a way you still have just direct control over your party leader because you can put in individual attacks for that person. You can use whatever items you want. But actually there's also still an auto battle system where it'll choose attacks for your party leader as well, which will really speed up the battles. But overall, I'm really happy with the battle system. It's very fast-paced, it's very hectic. There's never a moment of, no action on the screen. There's usually always something happening. And the boss fights are a real standout in the game when it comes down to the battles. In terms of the music and the graphics and everything, I'm really enjoying the music. It's a lot different than past Final Fantasy games, obviously, because Nobu isn't working on the the score of the game. But to me, it still sounds wonderful. The graphics are really, really nice. The FMVs are on par with Final Fantasy VII Advent Children. They're really that good. In-game graphics are really nice as well. There were just a lot of points in the game where I just stopped there and I looked around just to take in the surroundings because they did a really good job in designing some of the parts of the game. But one of my main gripes about that is the camera. The first time you pick up the game, you'll notice that the camera is very forceful. It doesn't always go where you want it to go. If you want to look a certain way, sometimes it won't let you. It's just a really bad camera. You get used to it later on, but it's kind of restricting at some points where you just want to have free control to look around the environments, but they don't let you all the time. So those are my impressions so far for the first 40 hours of the game. I'm really liking it. I love the story, I love the combat, the graphics are excellent, the music's enjoyable. I mean, what more can you ask for? Yes, it's linear. Yes, it's a huge departure from, what Final Fantasy games have done in the past with the no towns thing where you gotta buy everything through the save points, which honestly hasn't bothered me yet. One more thing that I didn't really like about the game, and actually the strategy guide discourages it as well until you're almost at the end of the game, and that's powering up your accessories and your weapons and everything like that. Because throughout the game, after you defeat enemies, you get all these different animal parts and everything that you use to upgrade your weapons and your equipment. And they discourage that until you're, almost done with the game. So you're getting all these parts and you have these weapons and, they're level 1 and you feel like leveling them up, but you really shouldn't because you don't have the right parts to do it efficiently. And, I just got to the point in the game now where I've started to upgrade them, and it's very basic. You just throw on all different parts and, There's different ways to do it more efficiently, where you use animal parts first and then you use mechanical parts, so you get the biggest experience boost, and you level the weapons up. They get stronger. You can get them to different tiers so that they turn into a different weapon. It's all pretty basic. There's different combinations you can do with your accessories so that you get different stat bonuses. There's no armor. There's no like body armor. It's only accessories and weapons. But let me just give you an example of how you can customize your characters. Right now, for my lightning build, I'm making her a speed character, so I have a sword on that gives her, it fills up her active time battle bar a little bit every time she hits an enemy, but then I also have accessories equipped that make her active time battle bar fill up 20% faster. So she's really geared right now as like a speed attack character, so there's a bit of customization when it comes down to that, which I was really surprised that they didn't set it up so that at the beginning of the game it's beneficiary to upgrade your weapons, whereas at least the guide is saying that you shouldn't do that until the end of the game. So I don't know if I should have been doing it early on, if there would have been any benefits to using up all my items early on, but it was kind of bland not having any kind of like upgrade system until I was 30 hours in. But there you go, guys. That's just my impressions of the first 40 hours of the game. I'm really liking it right now. I'm loving the battle system. I'm loving, the world, the characters, the story. And now that I'm into the upgrading system on the weapons and everything and the customization of it, I'm enjoying that as well. It's definitely not, don't go into it expecting a Final Fantasy of the past. Go into it expecting something totally fresh, totally new, and you might walk away really surprised and really liking it. Alright, the next game I want to talk about is Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing on the Xbox 360, and I played quite a bit of this. I put about 20 hours in. Honestly, I played almost exclusively online because that's what I bought the game for. So it has a full-fledged online 8-player mode, and it's a lot of fun. This is basically Mario Kart, not on a Nintendo system. This is the closest thing we've had, since Crash Team Racing to, a rival of Mario Kart on anything but a Nintendo console. And I highly recommend it. If you like Mario Kart and you have a PS3 or a 360, or if you have a Wii and you want another kart racer on there, pick this game up. It's a lot of fun. Honestly, in my opinion, the course designs in this game are designed, a lot of them are better designed than a lot of the, recent Mario Kart tracks, like for the Mario Kart on Wii or GameCube and stuff. It's a very colorful and a vibrant game. The graphics are actually really nice. The frame rate holds up really well online. I never really get lag ever when I'm playing online, even with 8 players. There's something like 20 different tracks, I believe, all from like Monkey Ball games, Sonic games, Jet Set Radio games. There's even levels in there from House of the Dead. So they've got all these levels in here themed around different Sega games, and the characters are like really kooky. They got everything from the cast of Sonic characters to like Oopa Oopa from Fantasy Zone. They got the Bonanza Brothers. They got Ryu from Shenmue. They even threw it. The Xbox 360 version has Banjo-Kazooie. Samba de Amigo, and by the way, his levels in this game are completely insane. Like the Samba de Amigo tracks in this game are just, they top everything that, for the most part, a lot of the Mario Kart tracks. Let me just say the tracks are really well designed. They all have different hazards and everything going on, so they're a lot of fun to race. A nice example of a good track design as well are the Monkey Ball levels, where it's not just, simple turns and everything, and it's themed to look like it's from a Super Monkey Ball game. They actually have, like, the courses are laid out like a Monkey Ball track, so there's, like, sharp 180-degree turns, and it looks, the turns aren't smooth, they're, like, sharp. It's, think of it like, if you took rulers and you, lined them up and made your own track like that, only you cut them in half and you made, like, really sharp turns, and the turns were not, like, rounded, they were pointed. You guys know what I'm talking about, I hope. But the courses in the Monkey Ball levels are really designed well. They're very challenging. And of course they got the weapons like Mario Kart has, where you have, they replace, obviously it's not shells, they use like boxing gloves and they use like bombs and everything like that. But you got your standard tracking missiles, and you got your, the items that you leave behind, so when enemies crash into it, they spin out. You got rainbows that blur people's vision. You got something that basically flips the screen upside down and makes you drive in reverse. That's probably the hardest one to deal with. But the items are kind of uninspired. You know, it's mainly the tracks and the characters that, you know, keep you coming back. I would definitely recommend this for anybody that's a fan of Mario Kart or, you know, arcadey racers, and you've been looking for something like this on the 360 or the PS3. This is definitely the closest thing, and I highly recommend it. And staying on the Sonic theme, I also picked up Sonic Classic Collection on the DS. This is basically a repackaging of Sonic the Hedgehog 1, 2, 3, Sonic and Knuckles, and the capabilities of, you know, using Knuckles in Sonic 2 and 3. You know, whereas if you put the game on, when they released Sonic and Knuckles on the Genesis, you know how you can take the cartridges and put them in the Sonic and Knuckles cartridge and play as Knuckles in the older Sonic games? That's in here as well. Now, I didn't play too much of this. I played Sonic the Hedgehog 3, and I want to say I was a little bit disappointed because there was some slowdown in the game, and I don't remember it being in the original version on the Genesis, so the DS version does have a little bit of lag with these ports. It is kind of convenient having all these games on one cartridge on the DS, but honestly, if you already own like Sonic's Genesis Collection or Sega Genesis Collection on the PSP or the PS2, I'd say stick with that unless you're a huge Sonic fan and you want it to go on the DS. It's a little overpriced at $30. I would say this is more of like a $20 pickup. So I would say wait for it to drop in price, or, you know, get it used at GameStop. But if you know, ever wanted all those Sonic games in one cart on the go on the DS, this is it right here. I also picked up Endless Ocean Blue World on the Wii, and I'll tell you, I always wanted to try the first Endless Ocean on the Wii. I heard good things about it, so when the second one came out, I heard that it was, you know, very much more improved over the first one. So I picked it up. Now, this was $30, and it comes with the Wii Speak and the game. So honestly, this is an awesome deal because they sell the Wii Speak separately for $30. So if I ever get a game that uses the Wii Speak, and I actually want to use it, I have one now, and it's basically like getting a free game to go along with it. Now, for those of you that don't know what Endless Ocean is, it's like 50% game and 50% like relaxation game, because basically you're in these oceans. Now, keep in mind, I've only played this game for about an hour and a half, so I haven't gotten that far into it. But the whole gist of it is, you're on a dive team, and you go down, and you're in these like serene oceans, and it's very calm and very relaxing. And you check out the different species of fish and different species of sharks and all the aquatic life down there. And you can, you know, zoom in first person, and you take a picture of them, and you add it to the catalog. And it's got some like mini-game elements in there, and I haven't gotten too far into it, but it's more of a game than the first one. The first one was kind of just like dive in the ocean and swim around, and that's about it, you know, from what I read. This one adds in a bit more of like video game elements to it. It's a pretty nice looking game for the Wii. It uses motion controls. Now, you can use the classic controller, but if you use the motion controls, which honestly is the worst part of the game so far for me, you have to point it at the screen, and you have to direct the swimmer where to go, and it's not like the smoothest thing out there. You also get like this gun where you can zap dangerous like sharks and make them friendly. That part I'm not too sure about yet, but really play this just to relax and swim through the different underwater parts of the game. And looking on the back here, it looks like you go through swamps with like giant arowanas. It goes beyond just like, you know, your standard ocean. And the maps are laid out, they're very big, you know, it's not just like this little pool that you swim around in. Like, it's a big ocean with a big map with different areas and everything with different species, like, depending upon where you go. It's very populated, and I'd recommend it for those of you out there that, you know, think you would be into something like this. This is definitely not something for everybody. Alright, next up, I picked up Pokemon SoulSilver for the Nintendo DS, and to go along with that, I picked up the strategy guide. I just want to say one thing about this guide. I have never bought any other Pokemon strategy guide, but the way that the walkthrough is laid out in this thing is so confusing at times. I don't know if any of you out there picked up the guide in the game, and you're trying to like follow through the strategy guide for the walkthrough and everything, but it is so confusing. Like, it's totally non-direct on like what you have to do next. Not very helpful. It's more for like the data tables. Like, they have obviously all the data tables for the Pokemon and all the moves and everything like that, which has been very helpful for me, but so for that, it was worth it, but for the walkthrough, I don't know, it's confusing at times. But other than that, I'm really enjoying the game so far. It had been years and years since I played Gold and Silver, and my background with Silver and Gold is that I originally picked up the Japanese version on the Game Boy Color, and I played through that. I put like 50 hours into that game back when I was a kid. And then I bought the Gold version when it came out in the United States. and I didn't get too far in gold. I mainly played a lot of silver. So it had been so long since I played this series that I will be truthful with you. The only thing I remember about this game so far is the daycare center. Like, everything else that I've been playing in this so far, I don't remember whatsoever. So the good thing for me is this feels like a fresh, brand new adventure that I've never played before. And I'm really happy about that. I'm enjoying it a lot more than Diamond and Pearl right now. I think that the world is just crafted better. It's a little bit more, I don't know, user friendly if you're not like a huge Pokemon fanatic and you don't know like all the ins and outs. But yeah, this is just a remake of Gold and Silver. You know, it's got the online mode where you have to add your friends to your friends list if you want to battle them. You can do trading and everything like that. Right now I'm about 14 hours in, and I'll be honest, the first day or two that I had the game, I only put like 2 or 3 hours in. I wasn't really feeling it, but it was that one moment where my starting fire Pokemon evolved into the second form. I was like, you know, I'm kind of getting back into this Pokemon thing. You know, and then I started catching a couple of Pokemon for my team, and they started evolving and, you know, learning new moves, and I'm like, yeah, this is the Pokemon I remember. So right now, I'm highly into it. Right now I'm training my Pokemon to beat the 4th gym leader. I got to train up my Togepi because I don't have a normal Pokemon to beat the Ghost-type Pokemon. And, you know, it's the whole big thing again with the rock, paper, scissors. And for those of you that never realized, there's like this whole hidden stat system behind Pokemon. You might think it's just like, okay, get this Pokemon and level him up, and his stats raise and his level goes up. But there's this whole system behind it where it has EVs, IVs, natures, and all this stuff is like hidden stats almost that determine how your Pokemon levels up. So I can catch a Pikachu in my game, and you can catch a Pikachu in your game, but because mine has a different nature and different like preferences, and it has different EVs and IVs, mine will totally level up differently than yours. So mine might specialize in special defense and special attack. Yours might be defense and speed, because they have different stats when you catch them. And this is something that a lot of people don't realize, and you can train Pokemon a certain way to level them up the way that you want. So I can catch a certain Pokemon, and by only battling against, say, like 1 or 2 Pokemon constantly and training him that way, I'll level him up, and it'll only raise certain stats, so he becomes like a super buffed version that you really want. So Pokemon honestly has a lot of hidden depth behind it, and I've been playing through this game, and I just don't understand how like 5-year-olds can pick this up and make progress. Like, there were a lot of times where I felt lost and I didn't know where to go next, or, you know, the gym leader was too powerful. Like, I see little kids buying this game. Honestly, I don't know how they like get past the first like 10 hours of this game. It's tough at times. So Pokemon isn't really, I'll admit, like this series has like a kiddie vibe tied to it because it's associated with young kids playing it, but there's a large audience out there like myself in their 20s that play the Pokemon games because they're very involved, they're very addicting. It's just, you know, a lot of fun to raise up your team and kind of progress through the game. And who cares if it's a show that was, you know, for kids and the series is supposed to be for kids. There's people out there like me that, you know, really enjoy this series, and I'm liking it a lot. If any of you out there played Diamond and Pearl and you like that, I'd highly recommend this, especially if you played, you know, if you never played the originals of this, I'm enjoying this a lot more than Diamond. I'll just say that. So, oh, and one more thing, it came with a Pokewalker, which mine is actually on the floor, where you can transfer a Pokemon to this thing, and I don't remember if any of you remember that thing. I think it was like it was a Pikachu walker thing where you can walk around with it and it like counted your steps. Well, this is like the next iteration of that, where you can put one Pokemon in here at a time, and as you walk around you get experience, and you can get items, and you can, you know, battle Pokemon and catch Pokemon in this thing, and then when you turn your game back on, you can transfer them over. You can, you know, get items with friends with this. It connects wirelessly, and it adds an appeal to the game that just makes it a little bit more interesting and a little more fun. Next up, I picked up Lunar Silver Star Harmony for the PSP, which is an updated remake of Silver Star Story, which was on the Sega CD and the PlayStation 1. I put about an hour and a half into this. I got it recently, so I haven't had a lot of time to put into it, but I was a big fan of the original Silver Star Story on the PlayStation 1. I never beat that game, but I really did enjoy the characters and the story behind it. And this is basically a graphical update. I think the voices might have been redone a little bit too, but the main reason you'd pick this up is for the totally redone graphics, which I think look really good. And those of you that have never heard of Lunar before, it's a standard turn-based RPG series, and I'm enjoying it so far. The one main complaint that I have about it, though, is the load times are excruciating. Every time you get into a battle, there's a couple of seconds load time. And I've counted sometimes, like if you're in a town and you're going to a house or something, there can be up to like a 15-second load time. And it gets very bothersome. It can be anywhere between like a couple of seconds up to 15 seconds, but it's definitely noticeable and it slows the game down a lot. But those of you that played the original, I would recommend this. It's a nice update, but the load times are they're killing it for me right now. That's one thing that some games I can get over with, if it's just a couple of seconds, but 10 seconds is a little bit excessive. But if you've never played the series before, I would still recommend this. It's cheaper and a lot easier to get a hold of than the PlayStation 1 original, because if you try and get this on the PS1, if you go for like the whole big special pack with the cloth map and everything, you're looking at least $80, so a $30 alternative, that's definitely worth a look. Next, I picked up an RPG on the DS called Shin Megami Tensei Strange Journey. And this is the first Shin Megami Tensei game that I played on the DS. I never played Devil Survivor, so this is my first time with this series on the DS. And I have to say, I'm really surprised and I'm enjoying this a lot. I just got this yesterday. I'm about 2 hours in right now, and it really reminds me of Etrian Odyssey on the DS. It really is just like a straight-up dungeon crawl game. So if you guys are out there looking for like an epic story and memorable characters and towns and everything, this is absolutely not what this game is about. It's you got your home base and then you got the dungeons. And the whole story behind the game is basically you go to Antarctica because there's sort of like a black hole forming on the Earth, and you go to investigate. And it turns out that it's inhabited by demons, and you have to go and you have to save the world. The story is, it's enough to keep me interested from what I've seen so far. It's mainly the universe that's the most, appealing. It's really well designed from what I've seen so far. And the music in this game is very haunting. It has an awesome, awesome soundtrack, which, by the way, this comes with the soundtrack in here with 10 different tracks on it. But the reason this reminds me so much of Etrian Odyssey is because I read somewhere that it uses the same graphical engine as Etrian Odyssey. So the bottom screen on the DS has the map, which auto-maps, so as you go through the dungeons, it maps it out for you. It tells you, okay, a door is here, a staircase is here, blah, blah, blah. It does all that for you. The top screen is first person. You go through the dungeons and you get into random encounters. Now, for those of you that aren't familiar with the Shin Megami Tensei games, especially if you haven't played anything besides the Persona series, you basically recruit demons in this game, and you do that by talking to them. So when you get into a random battle, you can either choose to fight or talk to the demons. So if you choose to talk to them, you actually have a conversation with the enemies. Some of them are pretty funny because the demons have different personalities. And there's a whole different conversation system, and you try and recruit them to your team. So I could be talking to like this little devil guy, and he'll be like, okay, I'll join your team, but only if you give me, a healing item or something. And I go, okay, I give it to him. He's like, I still need a little bit more. Give me $100 and I'll join your team. And I go, okay. And he goes, yeah, I still need a little bit more. I want to drain some of your HP. And I say, no. And he'll either, let it fly by, or he might get mad and say, okay, forget you, and then the battle starts. So there's this whole kind of like rock, paper, scissors conversation system with the demons, and I have to say it's refreshing and it's a lot of fun. It has been in the past games, especially with the Devil Summoner games on the PlayStation 2. But it's a lot of fun in this. It's similar to a Pokemon game. So you get these demons, there's like 300 different ones in the game, and you can actually fuse them together and create all new demons, and their stats like carry over, and some of their moves carry over. So you can have like a pixie that has like heal and fire, and you can have like a muck slime thing that has like an ice spell. You fuse them together, you get a whole new demon, and like one of the moves might carry over. And the whole point of the game, you got your main character too, and you can level up his sword and his gun with all different attacks. But, your team also has 3 different demons, and the way you make progress through the game is you constantly have to capture new demons, and they highly encourage that you fuse them together. So it's, you can sit there and level up individual demons and try and, make them really strong and stick with the same team. But from what I've read, you won't really make it that far in the game. It's encouraged that you fuse them together, make new demons, level them up, fuse him with another demon, make a new one. And that's basically the whole gist of the game. So you're just going through these first-person dungeons, fighting bosses, getting demons, fusing them together, and so far it's been really addicting. It's been a lot of fun. It's got a really creepy atmosphere in this game because the music tracks in here have like those chants to them. Like the soundtrack is composed really well. It really fits well with the game. And then you got like this whole sci-fi theme to it. So another thing that's kind of a first for the series is usually it's always been like a horror kind of like cyberpunk kind of theme to the games. This is the first one that takes on a sci-fi theme with like artificial intelligence and black holes and, you know, alternate realities and space suits and everything like that. But I'm really enjoying this so far, so any of you out there that were a fan of Etrian Odyssey, if you were a fan of the Shin Megami Tensei games, I would definitely recommend this for you. Or if you're a fan of challenging dungeon crawl games, like the Darkspire, definitely pick up Strange Journey. And I got one game left to talk about. I mean, what else could it be? You know, the game that everybody's talking about. I saved the best to last, and that would have to be Fragile Dreams Farewell to the Runes of the Moon for the Wii. Sorry guys, no God of War. I haven't gotten around to picking that up yet because I'm still trying to play through all these games here, so once I'm done with, you know, Final Fantasy and everything, I'll have that. But in the meantime, let me talk about Fragile Dreams here, which was kind of almost an impulse buy for me. I had totally forgotten that this game even came out, and the reviews on it are kind of mediocre. They're sitting around like the 6 out of 10 range, but it seems like my kind of game. It's basically a third-person action RPG with a very strong emphasis on atmosphere and story. I'm about 2 hours in right now. I just got this yesterday, and it really reminds me a lot of Baroque on the Wii. If any of you ever played Baroque, it has a very similar control style, which in a way is a bad thing. So the combat is a little bit clunky. Right now it's very basic. It's just, you know, light attack, medium attack, heavy attack, and the camera's a little bit hard to control. It's very hard to time your attacks sometimes to, you know, do the light, medium, and heavy combos. But the meat of this game lies in its atmosphere and story. So it most closely resembles, if any of you ever saw the anime movie 5 centimeters per second, or Voices of a Distant Star. Think that style of anime movie, like, put into a video game. So it's, the whole story of it is, you're this kid, from what I know so far, you're this kid that you start off the game by talking about how you buried this old man. You live in this, like, desolate world, and you've never really been outside. You've lived with this old man for, like, your whole life inside this observatory. And he dies, and you bury him. And he leaves you a note that says, you know, head towards the tower in the east on the horizon, and you might find survivors. So the world is sort of like in ruins, like, everybody's dead, you see nobody. You know, you're walking around, everything is like decaying and everything. And you go out into the world, and all you have is a flashlight with you, and you use the Wii motion controls to shine it throughout the world. So a lot of the places that I've visited so far are like dark, and you have to shine your flashlight to see where you're going. And certain enemies are like ghosts, and you have to shine the flashlight on them to reveal them and see them. But really, so far, what's kept me hooked to this game is just the environments. Like, you'll be in a shopping mall that's deserted, and the attention to detail is, like, phenomenal. Usually with third-person RPGs that seem like they're kind of like almost like a rushed budget title, they might seem like repetitive in the hallways and everything like that. But I was in this mall in like the dark with my flashlight, and I was looking around, and like there's all different graffiti art all over the shops and everything like that, like all individually drawn, and you can tell that careful like attention was put into the design of these levels. And the game is not really meant to be a survival horror, like creepy kind of game, even though you're usually in the dark and you're shining around your light, and you know there's ghosts and there's monsters and everything like that. It's got like a light anime feel to it. It kind of has an art style similar to Eternal Sonata on the 360, but it also is very colorful. So like when you go outside, the sky is like, it's red and pink and blue and green, like, and there's stars all over. It's like got this really nice atmosphere to it. Unfortunately, it does suffer from a lot of gameplay hindrances. Like I said, the controls are pretty abysmal at times, because you have to turn the camera, you have to point at the screen and like get it towards the edge of the screen to like look left or right or turn, you know, the camera. So if you push it, if you turn the Wii remote too far to the left or right, it gets locked up and the camera kind of, you don't control it. There's also an inventory system in the game, so as you pick up items from enemies after you kill them, it's sort of similar to, I guess, Resident Evil, where you have a certain inventory space and you have to place your items specifically to maximize your space. Or I guess like a Diablo game, you know what I'm talking about, the inventory system where, you know, a certain item will take up a certain amount of blocks and you have to kind of piece them together. And then you make it back to a save point, and everything is really a mystery until you get to a save point, so you'll find out that you picked up a couple of items that are worth, currency for in-game, or you might pick up an item that kind of reveals the story of, someone that died. Like, you find the origami crane, and a little scene plays out where, it deals with the mother and a lost, the kid, like, loses her mother and everything like that. So it's got this kind of little story element going on to it with in-game items that you find. And when it comes down to the RPG gameplay, you defeat the enemies and your character levels up, you get more attack, you get more HP. You get different weapons, and they do eventually break. There's no duration bar that lets you know how close they are to breaking, so they break, and you gotta, just equip a different one. But luckily, currency it's kind of plentiful right now, and I can buy a couple of, sets of the weapons, so when one breaks, I just whip out the next one and keep going with that. So it's sort of like this fusion between a Dark Cloud game meets like an artistic anime meets, Baroque or a roguelike game on the Wii with clunky controls. So if this kind of sounds like your kind of game, check out some gameplay videos. If you're a fan of, really atmospheric games, definitely check out Fragile Dreams on the Wii.